Alright folks, here we go with Agents of SMERSH setup. First thing we want to do is place the board within easy reach everybody in the center of the table, as opposed to the coffee table if you're playing on the dining room table where people can't reach it. I do not know why people write this in the rule books like that all the time. Kind of common sense, but whatever. Next, we have the Dr. Lobo track. Dr. Lobo is the big bad, the one we're trying to defeat in this game. So we want to put his track somewhere next to the board, and then we want to take his pawn, which is this gray pawn here. We want to place it up here where it says start. These 5 decks of cards here are the encounter decks, and they represent 5 of the continents on the game board. As you can see, the coloring and the font for the location deck, both on the back of the card and then also on the face of the card, match the outline of locations on the board. Okay, so for North America, we have a blue font which matches the blue outline on locations in North America. For Europe, we have yellow font corresponding with the yellow outline and locations in Europe. Now, the designers took some liberties where they put Moscow in Asia, and they also put Mexico City in South America. For the sake of space, I'm going to put these off to the side. This game is a table hog, okay? Keep that in mind when playing it. So we're going to give these cards a shuffle and place them out. Okay, this deck of cards here is the status deck. Okay, you do not want to shuffle these. I actually put these in alphabetical order. Okay, these are different effects that can occur to a player during the game. Some good, some bad. Okay, so what we'll do is take these cards and place them off to the side within easy reach everybody. Again, you do not want to shuffle these or you'll be searching through them all day while you're trying to find a specific card. These little guys here are the top secret cards. They will help players throughout the game, and there's different ways you can collect these cards. Okay, most of the time it's during either a startup for each player's character or effects in the game. Alright, you want to give these cards a shuffle and then place them near the board where everybody can reach them. Okay, this deck of cards here is the Fate deck. Okay, these are pretty much the heart of the game in a sense. These will tell you what section in the book to reference for encounters. It'll tell you where your secret mission is in the game depending on the location of the city. It also randomizes a lot of things in the game, and we can gamble in the game. They're multifunctional cards. I won't get into how they are used in a second, but for now we just want to give this deck of cards a shuffle, place them nearby so everybody can reach them. Okay, these are the villain cards. They are multifunctional also. Okay, on the top part of the card we have the advance the villain section of the card, okay, which will advance Dr. Lobo's track here. The bottom end of the card is the end of turn effect. During setup, if you're playing with 1 or 2 players, you want to remove cards with a -1 or an injury and return these to the box. Okay, they will not be used for a game in a 1 or 2 player game. Also, in a 1 player game, in a solo game, you want to remove 3 random cards with a value of 1 up here in this book symbol. Alright, then you want to shuffle these cards together and create a pile within easy reach everybody. Now, we're a 3 and 4 player game. There is no modification done to this pile of cards. Okay, next we're going to get the dice pool ready for the game. There are 6 custom dice in Agents of SMERSH, and then 1 regular D6 die. We're going to take the regular D6 die, set that aside, okay, along with this gray die with the yellow font. We're going to set that aside. The other 5 custom dice will be taken and placed inside the bag, the dice bag that comes with the game, and that will be set aside. We will use these dice for different tests and combat later on in the game. Okay, next we want to take the location track token and place it next to the location track, not on the first spot on the location track, next to the location track. Now, in Agents of SMERSH, we will be fighting against the bad guys. Dr. Lobo is the big bad guy, and he has 4 henchmen, okay, and they have these location tokens, okay. On one side is the face of one of the 4 henchmen. On the back side is the word location. It's a green token. Okay, we want to place these out, give these location tokens a shuffle, and then we want to place out the henchmen cards. Okay, there's 4 of them. We have Darling, Pierre, Fedor, and Mr. Big. Now, on a 3 or 4 player game, we're going to take one of these black cubes and place it on the first section on the bottom of each henchman card. The henchmen have difficulty levels. Each one has 3. They move up during the game as you fight and win the fight against these henchmen. Now, in a solo game and a 2-player game, the henchmen are going to start their difficulty level at 2. Okay, and the number of that varies depending on how many players there are. Okay, in a 2-player game, 1 henchman will start at level 2, and in a solo game, 2 henchmen will start at level 2. Now to do this, I give these henchmen location tokens a shuffle, and I randomly choose one for each henchman that has to start off number 2 level. Like I said, for a 2-player game, it's only 1. So here we go, we have Pierre. We'll move Pierre up to level 2. Okay, and then you would flip his location token back over and give him a shuffle. These tokens will always be shuffled throughout the game, and then place them in a pile somewhere. Next we have these yellow intel tokens. There's 4 different types, various numbers of each. Okay, what we want to do is flip these face down, okay, with the intel facing up. Put them in a pile and give these a shuffle. These will always be shuffled just like the location tokens. Okay, now in a solo and 2-player game, a number of these tokens will be randomly placed on locations on the board. To do this, we'll take one of these fate cards here, and we'll look at the city location on the fate cards. Okay, and then we will take an intel token and place it on that city. For a 2-player game, we will do this twice. Okay, so we will take another fate card, look at the city, and place the intel token on that city. Then discard these cards. In a solo game, you will do this 3 times. Alright, these tokens here are airport closure tokens. They will be used throughout the game to close airports, obviously. I'm going to place these in a pile where everybody can reach them. Alright, these guys here are UN transport tokens. They allow players to move across the board. We'll get into that a little later on. We just want to put them in a pile within easy reach everybody. We also want to do that with the injure tokens here. Next, we will get into player character setup. Now, Agents of SMERSH comes with 5 characters that you can play with as players. Okay, there is Agent XX5 Rocco Jurgen, Agent X99 Dante Wright, Agent L39 Callie Dagger. Then we have Nika Shizuka, Agent U00. And finally we have Agent J06 Dexter Kane. Now, each player will select one of these characters and take their mat along with the corresponding character token for that character. Any unused player mats and character tokens will be returned to the box. They will not be used. Next, if we look down here on the player mat in red lettering, it will tell you where on the map that character starts. Here we have Dexter here. He starts in the Congo. Now these aren't locations on the board. They are actually just areas. So Dexter would start on the Congo here. Nika here would start in the Alps. Okay, next, each player will take 6 of these white cubes, place them on their player mat on the star symbols in the 5 skill levels on the left side of their player mat, and then also on the resolve track on the right side of their player mat. Okay, now if we look below the resolve track, there are these stars here. Okay, and that will tell you any special abilities that your character has, along with starting items. The case here in Nika, she starts with the watch status card. You would go through the status deck, find the status card, place it next to your character sheet. She also starts with 1 additional UN token. Dexter here may use up to 2 resolve, and that's a special ability, but he starts with 3 advanced skills. Okay, and that leads us into the next section of setup. Okay, there are 11 advanced skills that players can choose from. Now each player will want to choose 2 different advanced skills and place them on their player mat. These skills will help you throughout encounters in the game. So each player wants to take 2, place them on their player mat. Except for Dexter here, remember he starts with 3. Place the remaining advanced skill tokens in a pile nearby. You may need them later on. I'm going to do this off camera, sizes of the game. Okay, now there's a couple additional rules for a solo and 2-player game as far as setting up for characters. Okay, for a 2-player game, each player will take 2 UN tokens or additional UN transport tokens in the case of Nike here. Now, if you're playing with Callie, instead of taking 2 UN transport tokens, you would only take 1 and then 1 top secret card there. Okay, now in a solo game, each player would start with 3 UN transport tokens and a top secret card combined. Okay, in addition to any starting items that you have. Okay, now this could mean you could start with 2 UN transport tokens and then choose 1 top secret card, or 1 UN transport token and then 2 top secret cards, in addition to any starting items you have. Okay, now the final part of the player setup is our secret missions. Each player is going to randomly draw 2 fate cards, okay, and then they're going to slide these 2 fate cards underneath their player mat up top where it says location 1 and 2, okay, and they can choose to place these in any location they want to. It doesn't matter, okay, but you want to slide these under your player mat just enough so that the city on top of the fate card is sticking out. Next, we're going to take the reaction sheet, place it somewhere within easy reach everybody. Then a player who is not going to be the first player is going to take the Book of Encounters. Final step is to pick a first player. You can do this however you choose to do that, okay? And then you are ready to play Agents of SMERSH. Okay, folks, here we go with Agents of SMERSH. Okay, now in Agents of SMERSH, we are playing UN Secret Service spies in an international effort to stop SMERSH from world domination. Okay, we have to get between 3 and 5 encounters with henchmen in order to trigger the end of the game. Once that happens, we have to have the correct number of intel in the intel pool to win the game. Okay, and this is determined by the track on which Dr. Lobo is following. So once we have successfully encountered the henchmen, that depends on the player count again. We're playing 2 players, so we have to successfully defeat the henchmen 4 times. That'll end the game immediately. Okay, and then we will take a look at Dr. Lobo's track to see where he is. Okay, so let's say he's here on 5. Once we've done that, we gotta look at our intel in the intel pool. They'll be face down throughout the game, but once the game is ended, we would flip those over, okay, and then we would match the symbols on our intel in our intel pool that correspond with the track where Dr. Lobo is. So on 5, we would need 2 tokens with a gun symbol, 1 token with the walkie-talkie, and the double agent. If we have these symbols, then we win the game. If we do not, then we lose the game. Now, another way to win the game is to defeat all 4 of Dr. Lobo's henchmen. Okay, it's rare, and it's very difficult, because each time you successfully beat one of these henchmen in an encounter, the skill level goes up, and it gets tougher to beat the next time around. Another way to lose, other than not having the correct amount of symbols in the intel pool at the end of the game, is if Dr. Lobo's pawn ever gets down to 9. Okay, the first phase a player will take on their turn is the movement phase. Now, with movement, each player will get 2 movement points on their turn. Okay, and there's several different ways that you can actually move. The first movement is by land. Okay, so we go from one location on the board to another location on the board, and that would be 1 movement point. Okay, so each player gets 2 movement points during their turn, so they could go 2 locations by land. Okay, as long as these locations are connected by a line. Okay, now there's some special lines, and we'll get into them in a second, but for the most part, you can move by land, going up to 2 locations away. The next type of movement is taking an airplane. Okay, as you can see, some locations have this airport symbol on it. If you start your turn on a location with the airplane symbol on it, you can then fly to any other location on the map with an airplane symbol on it. Once you've done that, you immediately end your turn. You do not get an additional movement point. The next is the Russian railroad up here. As we can see up in Russia, there are 6 locations with the train symbol on it. Okay, and they are only in Russia, determined by the hammer and sickle symbol there. You can move from one point on the railroad to any other point on the railroad for 1 movement point. So, say I wanted to go from Kazan here all the way over to Ulanud. That's 1 point of movement. Now, I could also use my additional point, my second point of movement, to go off the Russian Railroad. I could go to Beijing, or vice versa. I could start at Beijing and then move on to the Russian Railroad here at Ulanud, and then move all the way to Moscow for my second movement point. Another way that players can move across the board is by spending these UN transport tokens. Okay, this will allow you to go from any one location to any other location on the board, and then you would discard the token into the UN token supply that you have. Next, we have movement in the ocean locations. Okay, anytime you move into a location in the ocean spaces, you automatically stop your movement. Okay, so if I went from the card here to the North Atlantic Ocean, I would end my movement even though I only spent 1 point of movement. I could, however, go from, let's say, Casablanca to the Kahar and then to the North Atlantic and then stop my movement using both points of movement. If we look here on the island, it has an arrow that points away from it, and there are several other locations on the board that have that. These are usually your starting areas, or through the Book of Encounters they will push you to these areas. Okay, but if you end your turn on a location with that arrow pointing away, on your next turn you must move out of that location. Okay, alternatively, say you didn't want to travel the world, you wanted to rest. You can only do this if you have 2 or more injury tokens on your character sheet. Okay, now if you do this, you will heal 2 points of injury, and then you will skip the encounter phase, which is coming up in a few seconds. Now, there is a special rule for resting with a solo game, and I'll get into that after I explain the rest of how the game works. Each player has a certain amount of resolve, and it depends on the character that the players chose. But for Dexter here, he has a resolve of 6. If he chose to, he could spend 1 resolve and move an additional point of movement. Okay, so say he was here and he wanted to go to the car. Okay, normally by land he can only spend 2 movement points. He could spend 1 point of resolve and then move 3 spaces. You cannot use this to cross over an ocean space. Okay, so say he was here, you cannot spend the resolve to move into the North Atlantic and then go over to Ottawa. Once you enter a space in the ocean, you must automatically stop. Players do not have to go up to the full 2 points of movement. They can only do 1, or they could choose not to move at all. It's your choice. Okay, next we go into the encounter phase. Now, Agents of SMERSH comes with this encounter book, which has hundreds of encounters in it. Okay, there's basically 4 different types of encounter. If you end your movement on a location without any tokens on it, and it is on land, you'll do a regular encounter. If you end your movement an ocean location, then you'll do an ocean encounter. If you end your movement on a location with an intel token on it, you'll do an intel encounter. And finally, you guessed it, if you end your movement on a location with a henchman location token on it, you'll do that one. Now, you can choose not to do an encounter with a location or an intel token on it if you want to. Okay, and if there are multiple tokens on a location and you end your movement on that location, you could choose which one to do or not to do either one. First, let's just go into a normal run-of-the-mill encounter. Now, as you can see, each continent has a color that corresponds with it, and that's indicated by the border of the location spaces. Okay, so North America is blue, South America is red, Europe is yellow, Africa is green, Asia is purple. Now, the ocean locations are gray. Okay, they do not have an encounter deck that corresponds with it, but the other continents do. And if we look at one of the encounter cards for North America, we can see that the font is in blue that corresponds to the outline of the locations in North America. Alright, and if we flip an encounter card over, we can also see that the top font color also matches. Now, there was some liberties taking making the game. Mexico is considered part of South America, and Moscow is considered part of Asia. Now, to figure out how you're going to do an encounter, there's 3 steps. For a normal encounter or an encounter with an intel token on it. First, what we're going to do is, like I said, grab that encounter card, which tells you the name of the encounter, and then you're going to look at this number here, which will tell you what section in the encounter book that encounter is. Okay, so here the encounter will be in section 9. If we look at the encounter book on the top right of the page, there's going to be a number that tells you what section of the book you are in. As you can see here, we have section 9 in the top right, and then the previous page will also have section 9. There's multiple pages for each section. Okay, but if we continue to flip back a couple pages, we can see that section 6. Okay, so the encounter book is broken up into these different sections. Alright, once we do that, we're going to go to the bottom part of the encounter card, which tells you which response group to look at. In this case, it would be G. Then we will take this group reaction sheet and we will look for response group G, and then players will choose one of these responses. The responses in the response group correspond with your advanced skills and also with your basic skills. Okay, but they're heavily geared towards the advanced skills. A player will then choose which of these responses that he wishes to do. Derek here has disguise, so let's say he'll go with that one. We'll look at response group G here. We'll go down. Maybe he wants to select blend in. Now that will tell you what paragraph to look at. Okay, so far we got section 9, paragraph 5. So in section 9, look for section 9.5. Okay, now the final part to figure out your encounter is to flip over one of these fate cards and look for the corresponding number here. Okay, now if you have no intel, you look at the first number here. If you have intel, you look at the second number, and if it's at an ocean location, you look at this third number here. So this location does not have intel, we'll go with 3. So it'll be 9.5.3. And then we go down in the book and we find 9.5.3. Now if we look at the passage that is the encounter, we'll see it's broken up into 4 different sections. First we have some flavor text telling you what the encounter is. Then below that we have a sentence or 2 that tells us what we need to test this encounter with. Okay, and that is always in bold. And then below that we have a pass or fail condition. Now it is recommended that if you are playing with more than one person, somebody other than the active player reads the encounters. If you are playing solo, then it's recommended that you cover up the pass or fail conditions with a card, so you're not spoiling it for yourself. Alright, so what will happen is the player will read the passage. Okay, so it says, with carefully planted blood and tissue, you have faked your own death so well that media mogul Robert Merson has printed your obituary. If he thinks you're no longer a threat, maybe he'll let his guard down. You abduct the security guard who looks most like you from his estate and carefully disguise yourself to take their place. The next day, you go into work and rig the camera system. Late that night, you spring into action. So that's the flavor text. That's telling you what the encounter is. Next, we have the test that you're going to take. Now, it says test spycraft -1 or athletics +1, and then in brackets there's 2. And if we read further, it says pass with electronics or stealth. Now this pass with electronics or stealth things in the parentheses corresponds with your advanced skills. If you have one of those advanced skills listed, you automatically pass. Okay, Dexter here does not. So he will have to test his spycraft -1 or his athletics +1. Okay, so we look down here, his spycraft -1 would be 0. His athletics is 1, so he could add 1. But he needs 2 successes if he chooses athletics. Okay, so what does all this mean? Whenever you perform a test, you always roll this gray die with the yellow symbols on it. Now this spycraft -1 and the athletics +1, that allows you to draw additional dice blindly out of the die bag to increase your odds. Okay, so here you have a choice. You could either test Spycraft -1, which would bring him from 1 to 0, meaning he could not draw any more dice out of the bag. Or you could do Athletics +1, which would give him 2, but he has to get 2 successes. Alright, now you do not move these cubes up and down, to reflect what the test is. You just manually do this in your head. These cubes only move if something says upgrade a skill. Alright, so if you wanted to, let's say he goes Athletics +2. He goes into the bag, draws 2 dice out. These dice have up to 4 symbols on them, depending on what die it is. We have a gun, which is the only way you can pass a skill test. We have Dr. Lobo symbol, which is an automatic failure. We have heal, which will let you heal a wound if you have them. And then also we have injury, which will give you an injury. When it comes to these skills tests, the only symbol that counts to pass is a gun. Everything else is considered a fail. Alright, so now players will take the number of dice, give them a roll, look for the gun symbol. Normally they only need 1 gun symbol to pass, but remember we tested athletics. We had that little bracket next to the conditions, which said we needed 2 successes to pass. He has 2 gun symbols though, so he did pass. Now the player with the encounter book will go back to the encounter. They'll go down and look at the pass section of that encounter. Or if the players did not successfully pass the test, they would go to the fail section. Alright, but they pass. So it says, you dodge from room to room, avoiding the remaining guards until you get inside Mr. Merson's office. Breaking open the safe, you take pictures of all the files, leaving behind a card saying rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. You get the feeling someone has helped you break inside. It is too easy. The unknown spy. Okay, now that is a reward for passing this encounter, the unknown spy. Anything that is in uppercase lettering is a reward or a penalty for either passing or failing. Alright, so the unknown spy is actually in one of these status cards. So what a player would do is go through the status cards until they found the unknown spy. They would take that status card, okay, and then they would place it next to their character sheet, and it's a benefit that they could use throughout the game. If you had an advanced skill that matches what is in that encounter, you automatically pass. You move on to the pass condition and read that passage. Now if you had failed, the player reading the encounter would read the fail condition and go through whatever the penalty for that fail condition was. Now while you're taking these tests, you can use your resolve here, and depending on the character you can add an additional die to your dice when you're rolling. Alright, or say you failed, okay, say you rolled this instead. Remember, you need 2 successes for this particular encounter. He would fail because he only has 1 gun symbol, 1 success. He could spend a resolve, and in this case he can only reroll a single die. Some characters let you reroll all dice. So you would look at the dice, see which one you want. The ratio of pass and fail is different between dice, and reroll, and then hey, you got the success. So you would read the success effects. Okay, so that's a basic no intel encounter. Now say we ended our movement on a space with an intel token on it. Here we have a choice of what we want to do. We can either put the intel token face down into our intel pool, and then we would do an encounter, but instead of using the no intel number here for the last number of the encounter, we would use the number that says with intel, and these are usually a harder encounter to do. Okay, now remember, the intel pool will determine if we won or lost the game when the end of the game is triggered by this track here. Now the other option we could do with intel is we can return the intel token to the supply, again without looking at it, and then we can take a location token and randomly place it on the board by using a fate card, looking at the city that the fate card tells you to put it on, and then placing the location token at that city. Then you would discard the fate card, and then you would do an encounter where you're at. And in either case, whether you exchange the intel for a location token or place the intel token in the pool, when you go to do your encounter, you'll always do the encounter with intel number being the last number. The ocean spaces are a little different when it comes to the encounters. Instead of drawing an encounter card from one of the encounter decks, we will look at the back of the response group card. Okay. Then we're going to roll a die, the D6 die, and then we will match the result of the roll to the number on the back of the response group chart. Okay, so here it says license to kill 51. That is the section you will look at in the encounter book, and then you will look at response group H on the back side of this. And then you will draw a fate card like before, but instead of looking at the no intel and intel numbers, you'd go down here to the ocean space number and then read off the encounter from there. When you enter movement on a location with a location token, you will simply flip that location token over and see which one of the henchmen you were going to encounter. So here we have Pierre. Then you will look at the henchman card, see what level the cube is on, and then go from there. Okay, you would read the encounter text, which will tell you what to test in red, and then depending on whether you pass or fail, you'll move down and read either the pass or fail. Now, regardless of whether you pass or fail, you will take the location token and give it a shuffle with the other location tokens that are in the pool. If you do pass an encounter with the henchman, you will move up the cube to the next level for that henchman, and you will move the location token up on the location intel track, one space. Now, if you were to encounter a henchman through an encounter effect, and you pass the encounter with that henchman, you would not move the location intelligence track up. Okay, you only do that when you encounter the henchman location token specifically. If you fail an encounter with a henchman, or any encounter for that matter, then you will draw a villain card, flip it over, and look at the top where it says villain advancement. You will then look at the book symbol. You'll see a number that corresponds to how many spaces on the Dr. Lobo track you have to move Dr. Lobo's pawn. Okay, so here it's a 1. We'd move his pawn down 1 space on the track. Okay, now the numbers are 1 and 2. There's about 15 or 16 of each of those. Then you have -1 and injure. There's 2 of each of those cards. Once you're done moving the track for Dr. Lobo, if you fail an encounter, okay, you resolve that card and then you discard it. If at any time you encounter a level 3 henchman and defeat him, you would then remove the cube from his card and flip his card over, and then go through the location tokens, find which one corresponds to his card, and remove that from the game. And then anytime in the future that you were to have an encounter with this henchman, you would automatically pass, and then each one has their own little reward that you can collect. Most of the time when you encounter something, it's going to be a test. You're going to have to test, roll the dice, figure out how many dice you're going to draw from the bag if you're going to. But another type of encounter resolution is called gambling. Okay, now the gamble, what you're going to do, the player involved in the gambling will take 5 cards, 5 fate cards. Okay, and if we look at the bottom of the card, it's going to be numbers and suits, just like a poker hand. What players want to do is exactly that. They're playing poker against the game. They're going to look at their hand, decide what they want to keep and what they want to do, if they want to keep them all, or they have the opportunity to discard 1 card and redraw and try and make the best hand out of that they can. Alright, so let's say this player here wants to get rid of this 4 here. Try and go with something a little better. Then they would draw a new card, see what they have. Now it's the game's turn. The game will draw 5 cards and compare. Okay, so the game has a pair. We do not have anything. Okay, we got a king high. That's it. So the game's hand 1, you would fail. You'd read the fail condition of the encounter. Then he would take all the cards used in the gambling action and discard them and face up in the discard pile. If the fate deck ever runs out, you would simply shuffle up the discarded cards, create a new fate deck out of it. Okay, now throughout the game, you can try and accomplish your secret mission. What this will do will give you a benefit. Alright, now you can complete these in any order you want to, and how you complete them is simply by going to the location. Whoops, wrong one. Going to the location, and then you do an encounter. Now, whether you pass or fail the encounter, you simply take your secret mission card and flip it over, sliding it back under. Now, once you have completed a secret mission, at the end of your turn, you can collect a reward. Okay, now you can either take one of these top secret cards, then you would place it near your player area. Alright, and these are benefits. They allow you to do special things. Like this one here will let you flip up the top 2 intel tokens in the intel pool, if there are any. Okay, so you would flip these guys up. Okay, helps you try and figure out, whether you want to push the location intel track up to beat Dr. Lobo. Some of them allow you to re-roll on a failure with certain basic skills that you have, stuff like that. Okay, alternatively, you can choose to move your resolve up 1. Now, throughout the game, you're going to be using resolve most of the time, to do their special effects. Reroll a die, add an additional die to a test, exchange multiple cards during gambling instead of just one, or that extra movement. Okay, and the resolve varies a little bit from character to character. Alright, but for most characters, you cannot move it back up once you use it. You just steadily decrease it until you get to 0. During the completion of a secret mission, you can choose to bump your resolve up 1. Now, if you're playing solo, you could bump it up twice instead of just once. Instead of bumping up your resolve, you can take a UN transport token. Again, that'll let you move anywhere on the board if you need to. Alright, and the final upgrade you could do by completing a top secret mission is to upgrade 1 basic skill. Okay, you can move it up 1 notch on the track that it's on. Now, also, if you have a negative status card when you complete a secret mission, if you choose not to do any of these upgrades, you can choose to discard that negative status that you have. It's your choice. Now, players will be able to collect the reward from completing a secret mission at the end of their turn. Once they complete the second secret mission, they can upgrade something again, get the benefit from completing a secret mission again. But you only have 2 of these. You do not discard them and redraw 2 new secret missions. Once you're done the encounter phase, we will move into the final phase. This is the villain phase. Regardless of whether you pass or fail an encounter, you're always going to draw a villain card from the top of the deck. And then instead of looking at the villain advance part of the card, you're going to look at the other end of the card, which is end of turn. Okay, now during this, a lot of times it'll say remove intel from a continent, okay, or a location, and then it'll say add intel to a location, or maybe 2 locations depending on the card, and then it'll usually say airport closed at such and such a location. Okay, so for this guy here, it says add intel to Cairo, so you would take an intel token from the supply, put it on Cairo, and then it says close airport Macau. You take one of these airport closed tokens, place it on Macau. Now what this means is from now on, a player cannot go from a city that has an airport symbol on it to Macau or any other location that has an airport closed symbol on it by the airport method of moving. You can still, however, go by moving on land. Okay, so throughout the game, it's going to get harder and harder to move around on the board. Now, the final part of the villain phase is to look for intel overflow. Okay, now for a 4-player game, this intel overflow will happen if there are ever 5 or more tokens, intel tokens, on the board. For a up to 3-player game, this will happen if there is ever 6 or more intel tokens on the board. Once you reach that number, all intel will be wiped from the board and placed back in the supply and then shuffled in. Okay, location tokens aren't affected by this unless you have more than one location token on the board when this intel overflow happens. If you do have more than one location token on the board, then the location tokens are also sent back to the supply and shuffled in. Okay, so that's a player's turn. Then it'll move on to the player to their left, and it'll continue until you have successfully won a number of henchmen encounters. And again, it depends on the player count. So for 2 players, you need to do it 4 times, at which point you will flip over your intel pool tokens, and if they meet or exceed the different intel token symbols on the Dr. Lobo track where Dr. Lobo is, you win the game. If it doesn't, then you lose the game. Players will also lose if Dr. Lobo ever gets down to 9 on his track, or players can also win if they ever beat all 4 henchmen. Okay, now that's basically the game. Now before I let you guys go, there's a few more things we want to discuss that I didn't do in the basic how to play overview. Okay, first thing is with the rest action in a solo game, you can't do it unless you have 2 or more injury tokens. You can rest, discard 2 of the injury tokens. You would skip the encounter phase, but when you're playing solo, you would have to go into the die bag, get the blue die out, and give that guy a roll. If you pass, if you get the gun, where is it? Then you don't have to do anything, you just move on to the encounter phase. If you fail, then you have to draw a villain card and move Dr. Lobo's pawn up the number of spaces. If you're taking a test during the encounter phase, and the test says something, let's say hand-to-hand -2, and you go into the negatives. If you were to use your resolve, you would factor that in. Okay, so if I was testing hand-to-hand -2, it would bring me to -1. Then I would use my resolve to try and bump that up. Okay, so I had a character that would let me draw 2 dice out of the die bag. I would have to factor in that negative number. Okay, so it would bring me back up to 1. Okay, wouldn't bottom out at 0, and then I could add 2. I'd have to factor in that negative number. Now, like I said, throughout the game, players will be taking injuries. If the number of injuries ever meets or exceeds the number of their health up here in that heart symbol there, you would immediately discard the injury tokens, draw a villain card, and do the advanced villain section of the card. And then you would continue the encounter like normal. Okay, this does not affect your pass or fail condition when you're testing, right? But you must immediately do the villain phase, the villain advancement phase of the game. Once you lose, okay, you lose all your health. You cannot die in Agents of SMERSH except for one special case, and that is if the encounter specifically says draw a new character card or reset your current character, starting with 2 less resolve. These are the only way that your character dies or passes on, as they say. Then you would simply choose a new character card and token, put them out in their starting position with the penalty of -2 resolve. You would get 2 new secret mission cards, discarding the old ones, clear, and continue the game as normal. Okay, now there's a couple keywords and all that we want to get into before we move on. Okay, now during the encounter, when you are getting rewards or penalties, if it says intel or 2 intel, then you will be able to take either 1 or 2 intels from the supply and place them into the intel pool. Face down. You never look at the intel token unless something says you can flip an intel token up. Okay, if it says top secret, draw a top secret card. If it says 1 or 2 resolve, you can bump your resolve up 1 or 2 depending on what the encounter specifies. If it says up any skill, then you would take your base skills and you can up one of those one space over. Okay, now some of them say up a specific skill, then you would only be able to up that one specific skill. If it says do not advance villain, if you fail a test, then you simply forego the villain advancement card. Okay, you simply just pass that on and go to the end of turn phase. If it says advanced skill, then you can choose to take an advanced skill from the pile, and it is now your new skill. Place it on your character sheet, and you have the ability to use that skill from there on out. Sometimes they'll say a specific advanced skill that you have to use. Just look for that specific skill in the pile, place it on your character board. If it says lose 1 or 2 intel from the pool, you simply take an intel token from the pool and return it to the intel supply without looking at it unless it's been flipped up already. If it has been, you flip it back over, shuffle it into the supply. Sometimes they'll say lower a specific skill, like lower hand to hand. You have to bump it down one. Sometimes it'll say V1. Now that isn't a top secret card. It's not a status, so just remember that. You would go through the top secret cards until you found a V1 card and then place it down in your player area. Now, if you ever run out of tokens, intel tokens in the supply, and you need to place them on the board, then you would have to take an intel token or 2, depending on how many the card tells you, from the intel pool and place it out on the board in the appropriate spot. If at any time during the game you are able to gain a status card, but there are no copies of that available, other players have the copy of that card, then you will be able to either take a top secret card or gain 1 resolve on your player board. The final little rule is players cannot trade cards with other players. Okay, it's a no-no. And that is how you play Agents of SMERSH.